I am Dr. Shefali Mishra, Associate Professor, Department of Psychology, Jesus and Mary College, University of Delhi. In this special session, today we also have symbolic expressions where we have with us Ms. Manisha Sharma, the sign language interpreter. We were in the previous section discussing about the differences between quantitative and qualitative research, and there we focused on the 7-step process which is undertaken by a quantitative researcher. Now we will start with the qualitative research and the 7-step process which a qualitative researcher adopts. So, in qualitative research, the first step is self-assessment and reflection in socio-historical context. That is, researchers' own awareness of social sense and researchers' position in society. So, researcher has to first see where he or she stands in society, what are his perspective, what are his guiding philosophies, how he or she interprets the world around. So, one's own assessment and reflection is very important as the first step of qualitative researcher. Second, we adopt a perspective that is focused on theoretical philosophical paradigm. So, the qualitative researcher has to identify which paradigm the person wants to align with. And then of course, we have similar steps like the quantitative research that you design study, you collect data, you analyze data and you interpret data. However, we must keep in mind that here all these 4 steps are not like in a sequence, but they are simultaneously taking place. Like you keep on moving back and forth in these steps. It is like construct a new concept and theoretical interpretation. This particular step will help you doing that, and then finally, just like a quantitative researcher does, you have to inform others in qualitative research, because you have to share your findings with the scientific community. So, if we look at the steps in research which is qualitative research, we see acknowledgement of self and context, then adopting perspective, design study, data collection, data analysis, interpretation of data and final reporting. So, now let us look at some of the more specific differences between quantitative and qualitative research. The difference of research techniques such as analyzing test scores in quantitative research and analyzing interviews in qualitative research are often considered as the main differences between the two approaches. But however, the fundamental differences lie in the philosophical assumption, namely ontology, epistemology, methodology and axiology. We all have studied about what is ontology, epistemology, methodology, etc. in our previous sessions on research in psychology. However, we like to revisit these philosophical assumptions with special reference to quantitative and qualitative research differences. So, we know that whether we are aware or we are not aware, we always bring certain beliefs and philosophical assumptions to our researchers. And one of the basis of difference is the ontology. So, ontology, as we have studied, is a study of the fundamental nature of reality. So, it pertains to the assumptions made by researcher to determine and make sense of phenomena. In quantitative research, which is based on the positivist perspective, assumes that reality is singular, it is tangible and it can be broken down into fragments. There are researchers who argue that there is a single truth as per quantitative approach. Qualitative research is grounded in interpretivism and constructivism, and it posits that realities are diverse, socially constructed and holistic. So, reality is context dependent according to qualitative research, and it is continuously constructed by participants according to their understanding. Understanding of ontology is essential for researchers to interpret their collected data. One's ontological belief shapes the formulation of research questions, understanding their significance and approaches to data analysis. The next basis of difference is epistemology, and from our previous sessions we have studied that epistemology examines the nature and scope of knowledge. It is that branch of philosophy which examines the nature of knowledge and truth. So, the following questions are addressed here. What constitutes knowledge? These questions raise a fundamental question: how can researchers investigate what they believe to be known? Quantitative research is grounded in positivism, we already know this, and it operates under the assumption that there exists an objective and rationally organized reality that is independent of the perceptions of researchers and research participants. Quantitative research adopts an ethic view in epistemology, where the researcher positions himself as external observer of the subject under investigation. Put simply, they are unable to exert any influence on or be influenced by the subject under investigation, which is aimed at objectively determining the truth. So, this is about quantitative research. Qualitative research, on the other hand, adopts an emic perspective in epistemology, which is emphasizing the importance of interactions between researchers and participants or the subject of investigation for achieving a comprehensive understanding. According to researchers, qualitative research suggests that reality is subjective and it is shaped by individual and the society. Consequently, individuals can only comprehend reality through their own perceptions and interpretations. Epistemology is crucial as it influences a researcher's approach to studying and acquiring knowledge within a specific context. So, whether a researcher wants to adopt a quantitative mode or the qualitative mode will depend on the epistemological perspective. Third important point of difference is methodology. The methodology covers the philosophical principles that guide the collection of data and dictates the specific methods employed. Quantitative research aims to establish a generalizable explanation through the use of statistically measurable tools. The research methodology is commonly referred to as experimental. The research process begins by formulating research questions and hypotheses, which is followed by implementing interventions and analyzing the results to determine whether the hypotheses are supported or not supported. Quantitative researchers utilize reliability and validity as criteria for evaluating their research. This is crucial to ensure that research findings are not influenced or biased by unidentified factors. This concept is represented in the randomization of the sampling technique, which makes it possible to create a sample that is an objective depiction of the population. So, quantitative research involves statistical analysis and utilizes methods such as experimental research, survey research, correlational research and quasi-experimental research. These methods are guided by the principles of objectivity and generalizability. So, the research study has to be objective, free from the subjective bias as per the quantitative researcher, and the idea is to generalize from the findings, which is the finding of the research study, which is based on a particular sample. Quantitative research employs deductive and reasoning, while qualitative researcher employs inductive reasoning. Qualitative research aims to gain a comprehensive understanding of a phenomenon by providing in-depth discrimination from the perspective of both researchers and participants. This kind of approach is based on the epistemological premise that researchers can only offer their interpretation of the subject under investigation. In qualitative research, purposive sampling strategy is employed to select a sample that can offer comprehensive information for understanding the phenomenon. Research is not evaluated based on objectivity and generalizability here, unlike quantitative research. In other words, qualitative studies are assessed using the concepts of what we can call credibility, transferability, dependability and confirmability. So, let us now see what all these stand for. Credibility, as defined by Lincoln in Cuba in 1986, refers to the level of confidence in the truthfulness of the findings from the perspectives of the participants. Transferability refers to the extent to which the findings can be applied to different contexts. Next is dependability and reliability. These are analogous in quantitative research. A study is considered reliable if the results of a qualitative study can be replicated. Just like in quantitative study, however, the kind of reliability here we are talking about here would be different. Confirmability refers to the extent to which other researchers would be able to validate and corroborate the findings. Qualitative research, therefore, seeks to enhance comprehension of a phenomenon by examining it from the perspective of the participants and providing detailed and comprehensive description of the event. The interpretive character of this requires gathering data through interviews, through observations and through other interactive activities. Researchers employ 5 distinct methodologies to accomplish their research objectives in qualitative research. Number 1 is narrative. This involves exploring the life of an individual. Number 2, phenomenological, which aims to understand the essence of an experience. 3 is grounded theory approach, which involves developing a theory based on data collected from the field. Number 4 is ethnographic, which focuses on describing and interpreting a group that shares a culture. And number 5, we have case study research, which involves developing a detailed description and analysis of one or more specific cases. The next basis or assumption on which qualitative research differs from quantitative research is axiology. Axiology pertains to the significance of values in the context of research. So, what are the values held by the researcher? It emphasizes on those values. So, quantitative research, which employs the positivist method, is different because it always focuses in differentiating objective facts and subjective values. It keeps on creating or identifying differences between objective facts and the subjective values held by the researcher. They want to distance themselves from the subjective values. So, facts are considered to be objective and true, whereas values are considered to be subjective and something which should not be included in the study. This distinction can be intrinsically deceptive and hinder the search for truth. That is what scholars say. The underlying axiological premise in this context is that objectivity is desirable, whereas subjectivity is undesirable. On the other hand, the researcher acknowledges and reveals their personal beliefs and biases that may influence the study, as well as the fact that the data collected in qualitative research is value laden. That is, it is influenced by subjective experiences, subjective judgments and values of the researcher. In practice, the researcher acknowledges that the reported stories not only convey the perspective of the participant, but also the researcher's own viewpoint. So, axiology is crucial because values play a central role in research and are seen as inevitable in influencing the outcome of qualitative research. So, whereas we see values are not given importance in quantitative research, they are emphasized a lot in qualitative research. Axiology, as we have seen, examines the value that researcher assigns to various elements of research, including participants, data and even audience. Put simply, one's axiological assumption can be deduced from the other 3 assumptions. The basic difference between quantitative and qualitative techniques resides in their underlying philosophical assumption, and we have already observed this. The 2 methods are derived from distinct ontological, epistemological, methodological and axiological standpoint. An individual's perspective on the nature of reality, that is its ontology, determines their theory of knowledge, which is epistemology, which in turn determines their approach to conducting research or investigation, which is methodology. So, we have seen how these three are connected, and finally, we have axiology, which is influenced by all these three. So, the researcher's philosophical beliefs determine both the focus of the investigation and the approach they will use to do it. Quantitative research enables researcher to empirically test certain hypotheses and derive conclusions that can be applied to a broader population. However, it does not provide detailed information about the subjective experiences of the participants. Qualitative research, on the other hand, offers a comprehensive and detailed understanding of the participants' emotions, opinions, perspectives and personal experiences as expressed in their own words. One drawback is there of the qualitative research, that the results may be influenced by the bias and the personal subjectivity of the researchers. Although some research studies rely on a single strategy, it is advantageous to employ both quantitative and qualitative methods together in order to gain a more comprehensive understanding of intricate problems and occurrences. So, if we look at quantitative and qualitative research, we see that there are many differences. Let us try to sum up the differences now, and we also see that despite the differences, they complement each other. So, if we compare them on certain dimensions, we see that they differ from each other, and still they seem to be there to support, to complement each other. So, the first basis of difference, if we take the nature of data, then we see that quantitative data has numbers, which is referred to as hard data, and the qualitative data is known as soft data, because it includes photos, sentences, narratives, symbols, texts, etc., visual text, written text, etc. If we look at the logic, then the second basis of comparison, then we see that the quantitative researcher adopts reconstructed logic, which is like it is highly organized, it is very systematic. But here in qualitative research, we can say that logic is in practice, which is we take into account the informal folk wisdom, and there are fewer rules in qualitative research to follow. So, less of rigidity and more of flexibility. If we see the third basis of comparison, that is research path that is followed by quantitative and qualitative researchers, we see the quantitative research follows a linear path, which is clear step by step. So, after step number 1, step number 2 will come, so on and so forth. However, in qualitative research, we have a non-linear path. Rather, you can say that we have cyclical path, like back and forth. So, there is lot of movement in different among different steps, like you are collecting data or design of the study, analysis of the study. So, you keep moving back and forth. When we compare it on the basis of objectivity and integrity, we see that quantitative research is again precise and standard and very mechanical in nature. It uses techniques which are like mechanical, very fixed techniques, and it believes in replication. However, in qualitative research, subjectivity is emphasized, and subjectivity here is equal to the objectivity, and objectivity equals to trustworthiness, and first hand knowledge is what is focused upon and what is valued. Now, next basis of comparison is research topic. So, in quantitative research, we see that the research topic is there from the beginning, it is pre-planned, but in qualitative research, it is emergent. So, it is like very vague in the beginning and very unclear in the beginning, and gradually it becomes more and more clear. Validity, with regards to validity, we know quantitative research in validity considers validity as if the test or if the study is measuring what it claims to measure. But here in qualitative research, validity is about intersubjectivity. It is about small details or seeking connections among diverse data. Similarly, reliability in quantitative, we all know that it is about consistency in results and findings, but in qualitative research, consistency is obtained through use of variety of other techniques, and authenticity is what is valued. Sampling for quantitative, we know that there are number of sampling techniques available, but since in qualitative research there is less focus on representativeness of the data, cases that deepen our understanding are selected. So, in-depth information rich data is the goal of the researcher. When we look at the we see that quantitative will measure objective facts, and qualitative on the other hand will be, beliefs in construction of social reality, cultural meanings attached to what people say, what people do, and whereas quantitative will focus on variables, qualitative will focus on interactive processes and events. Qualitative will focus on authenticity, whereas quantitative is focusing on reliability. Quantitative research is mostly value free, but here in qualitative research values are present and they are explicit. In quantitative, theory and data are separate, and in qualitative research we find that theory and data are fused. Similarly, the quantitative research is independent of context. So, we have already studied about objectivism, positivism. So, we know the researcher and the reality are two different entities, but here the qualitative research is situationally constrained. Of course, in quantitative research we know that there are many cases, many subjects are taken, say hundreds of participants should be there in the research studies, but in qualitative research even if there are few cases, few participants, the research study can be conducted. Regarding the analysis, we note that quantitative research always takes up statistical analysis of some form, whereas qualitative will do analysis which is theme based, like thematic analysis, etc. Here in quantitative the researcher is detached, whereas in qualitative researcher is actively involved or engaged with the data. So, although there may not be a definitive distinction between the two in all situations, it is evident from here that the underlying principles of qualitative psychological research differ from those of quantitative research in psychology. Now, next we will focus on what can we do if to overcome the limitation of quantitative or qualitative research, whichever we have taken up. So, there is also a proposition that combining methods in psychological research can help us get richer data. So, traditionally psychological research has heavily depended on experimental and quasi-experimental investigation for the collection and analysis of numerical data. So, even when narrative or other unstructured data such as films, observations or field notes have been gathered, they have been subjected to quantitative analysis by transforming them into numerical indicators. While it is uncommon to encounter a strictly positivistic perspective in depictions of psychological research, it is valuable to acknowledge its effects. The positivist paradigm supported the idea that there are objective and observable realities, which led to the view that human behavior could be predicted based on its previous events and that there were specific causes for every behavior. Although these attempts to anticipate and explain behaviors and connections may seem attractive, they have been considered inadequate for nearly 50 years now. The post-positivist scholars in the field of psychology have offered a significantly more comprehensive way to conducting research. This approach recognizes the existence of multiple factors that contribute to a phenomenon. It emphasizes the importance of making predictions rather than focusing on causation in research. The predictions are centered around groups of individuals or events rather than focusing on individual level predictions. It also acknowledges the subjective influence of both the participant and the researcher in producing the outcome. Additionally, It allows for the consideration of cultural and value differences in research. Despite the growing emphasis on subjectivism, contextual effects, cognitive processes, and the importance of understanding the perspectives of both the researchers and the participants, some psychology researchers have found the post-positivist paradigm unsatisfactory. Although psychology has been slow to change, most social behavioral disciplines have now extensively incorporated qualitative methods into their teaching and practice. The expansion of research in this field has resulted in suggestions to incorporate both the qualitative and the quantitative approaches or methods in studies. This is done to prevent the overly restrictive treatment of intricate, ever-changing human systems that is often associated with quantitative approaches, as well as to avoid the self-centered epistemological dilemma that is typically associated with qualitative approaches. So, combining of data will help us to do away with the strict requirements that quantitative and qualitative research present to us. So, due to the increasing number of these calls, that is to combine research methods and its ability to appeal to other disciplines, mixed method research has had an ongoing increase in popularity over the past decade. Thank you.